Good morning, Patriots. It is Friday chat session. This is Joel Fieri. Ben is not here. Apparently, he's got a family wedding that apparently is going to be a pretty huge blowout. So all day affair, he said. So he's out this week. He will be back next week. So for all that important young female demographic, Ben will be back next week. But now you're stuck with me. Let me see if anybody's here. Go to the comments. And nobody's here quite yet. I suspect Michael is, once again, keeping them late, going on and on and on. So what I wanted to talk about today, I want to follow up with yesterday's show. If you caught yesterday's show, we were talking about the church invasion, really, the church storming last Sunday in Minneapolis, when some professional leftist Marxist agitators decided they needed to interrupt a church service because the pastor supposedly has some association with ICE, which might be true. I couldn't really get an answer. It appears he does have some affiliation, but he's in federal law enforcement. No crime in that. But we talked about how that is probably one of the first plays in the Marxist playbook, is to attack faith, attack religion of any kind, because the main tenet of Marxism has to be there is no God. Because if there's a God that we are created by, endowed with, and responsible to, that God has ultimate authority over us. And in the Marxist mind, there is no authority but the state. And because I played an interview from a lady who lived through Maoist China, Chinese communism. And she talked about, most people think that communism is an atheistic faith, but she goes, it's not atheistic. It's a religion in itself. Mao is our God. We had our Bible, the little red book. We did our confessions that we aren't living up to Mao's ideal and we have to do better. And by the way, you have to do better, which is a big part of communism, is not just responsibility for your own salvation or whatever it is, or your own righteous standing before Mao or whoever it is, but you have, one of the main tenets, mainstays of communism is people turning in other people and turning citizen against citizen for the greater good. Obviously, it's all for the greater good. So if you didn't catch that, get on the website maybe and catch that. Morning, Lucas. So what I want to talk about today is follow up on that, meaning the one part of the Marxist playbook is to attack religion. Yes. Religion is the opium of the masses. Yes, that's the famous Marxist line, straight from Marx himself. And good to see you, Happy Bergie. Haven't, like I said, you show up once in a while. You used to be with William and me all the time. Good to see you. So what I want to do is follow up a little bit with that. It's kind of on the same vein, but not necessarily the playbook, but the underlying game plan. Attacking churches is part of the playbook, but the game plan is more what I want to talk about today. And what I wanted to do is play a clip that is so good, and it was from a show that was so good. If you want to really see a good representation on media dramatization about communism, is Chernobyl. It's the HBO miniseries Chernobyl. And I'll just go ahead and play the clip and we'll go from there.
No one in the room that night knew the shutdown button could act as a detonator. They didn't know it because it was kept from them.
Comrade Legasov, you're contradicting your own testimony in Vienna.
The testimony in Vienna was a lie. I lied to the world. Not the only one who kept the secrets. There are many. We were following orders from the KGB, from the Central Committee, and right now there are 16 reactors in the Soviet Union with the same fatal flaw. 3 of them are still running, less than 20 kilometers away at Chernobyl.
Professor Legasov, if you mean to suggest the Soviet state is somehow responsible for what happened, then I must warn you, you are treading on dangerous ground.
I've already trod on dangerous ground. We're on dangerous ground right now because of our secrets and our lies. They're practically what define us. When the truth offends, we lie and lie until we can no longer remember it is even there, but it is still there. Every lie we tell incurs a debt to the truth. Sooner or later, that debt is paid. That is how an RBMK reactor core explodes. Lies.
What?
All right. And honestly, Chernobyl might be the best thing I've seen on TV the last 10 years. The way they portrayed just the lighting and the color scheme of the whole miniseries, the camera angles, the drabness of it, the just oppressive bathing in lies and bathing in falsehood and bathing in fear that's portrayed. And you saw him there. He's just worn out by this time. If you've seen, it just follows basically the same timeline. It's very factual. I think they probably did, dramatize a lot of things, but they pretty much got the story of Chernobyl right. And they got the cause of Chernobyl right. And there's one scene in that movie where the reactor is blown up. Nobody believed the reactor had blown up because in the Soviet Union, nuclear reactors, RBMK nuclear reactors don't explode. So even though there's this huge explosion, radiation is everywhere, the Central Committee said, no, that didn't happen because in the Soviet Union, that can't happen. So we would rather just lie about it and cover it up. Like you said, at the very beginning, whoever was the head of that panel said, you're contradicting your testimony in Vienna. And he said, my testimony in Vienna was a lie because that's all we do is lie. So the Marxist, the game plan for Marxism is, number one, destroy the truth. The tactics are go after churches and go after anyone who might stand for truth, because that's the game plan. There's strategic and there's tactical, right? The tactics are one thing, the strategy is another. And the reason that Marxism has its roots in basically lies, like he said, is because it comes from the father of lies. And that's another thing that I wanted to bring up here. As kind of the basis of this is John 8. And this will tell you all you need to know about Marxism. And as soon as it comes up, we'll get to it. There it is. Okay. So John 8. At first, Jesus is talking to the Jews, and they're talking about whose children they are. Let's go to John 8:31. Oh, and we're jumping around here like crazy. To the Jews who had believed him, Jesus said, if you hold to my teaching, you're really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And of course, then they go down, we are Abraham's descendants, and we have never been slaves to anyone. How can you say that we will be set free? Okay. And then he talks about being slaves to sin. And then down here in verse 44, he tells them really what they are. Verse 44 says, you belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth. Okay, I'll say that again. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. Okay. And that's jumping around, so I'm going to get out of that. I'm not sure why it does that. Good old internet. So when you see that scene from Chernobyl, and he's talking about all we do is lie. It defines us. That's one of the things it says. Lies define us. We can't tell the truth, even when the truth's staring at us in the face, even when it's belching radiation at us and killing us, cooking us alive, whatever it does, right? Even though we're on the precipice of poisoning the entire continent of Europe, we're going to still lie about it, because it's better to lie than to face the truth. Because when you face the truth, you have to acknowledge that there is a original giver of truth, original source of truth. And Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and life. No one comes to the Father but through me. I am truth. Truth will set you free. But they're a slave to sin. They're a slave to lies. And the devil is a liar. And when he speaks lies, he speaks his native language. Well, that's the native language they were speaking in Chernobyl, all right. Right? So I'm going to clean things up here a little bit, because I think I'm getting a little sticky here. But I also wanted to go back. Yesterday, I showed a clip from that clip I showed you yesterday of the Chinese leader. It's from a guy called Dad Saves America, which is a great internet name. Every once in a while, I come across something and I'm like, why didn't I think of that? Why couldn't I be Dad Saves America, right? So, but he talks about something. He goes to an interview with Jordan Peterson, and I'm not sure who Jordan Peterson's talking to here, but this goes to Marx. This is where the game plan comes from. The game plan comes from Marx. Okay. And they talk about who Marx was and where Marx got his inspiration from and what he was all about. And I just want to play this.
I mean, Marx's secret love was poetry, and it's deeply disturbing stuff. All right, a lot of it is about the devil. Thus heaven I forfeited, I know it full well. My heart, right, once true to God, is chosen for hell. That's his poetry from an early age. And by the way, he had a favorite line from Mephistopheles, which was, in fact, they said this was Marx's favorite quote. Everything that exists.
Yes, that's the line. Perish. Exactly. That's exactly the line.
Everything that exists must perish.
Okay. So everything that exists must perish. And you heard Marx's poetry. Marx was raised a religious person, a Christian. And then he turned in his youth away from it. And earlier in that, they talk about how he got together with a professor. What verse was that again? That was it was John 8:44 was the one I went over before. The one about the devil seeking to destroy. And earlier in John 8, I think it was 32 maybe, was when Jesus talked about being the truth, and the truth will set you free. Excuse me. They talk about this professor that he became really good friends with, and how they would go to churches and sit in the church and laugh and sneer and be disruptive to the church service. He told one story about how Marx and this guy during an Easter Palm Sunday celebration, they got a couple donkeys and rode into the celebration on donkeys, mocking the whole idea of Jesus coming in on a donkey. So Marx was very anti-Christian and very pro the devil. He was a Satanist. And this is where his playbook, his game plan came from. This is where his philosophy is rooted in. It's rooted in Satanism, and he dabbled in Satanism himself. So this favorite quote of his from, I think, Faust, Mephistopheles, which I have not read, but it's a little highbrow for me, but I'll have to look into it. But his favorite quote is, everything that exists must be destroyed. And this is what, and this is the last thing I'll put up here is John 10. And let me get it up here. And talking about this whole idea of everything that exists must be destroyed, because that's what Satan does. And Marx is doing Satan's bidding, basically. He was a Satanist. His philosophy came from satanic influence. I think that poetry that he was read there, my soul once reserved from God is now frozen for hell. So Marx had no disillusions about where he was going. Let's see. Oh, yes, here it is. Okay, John 10. And I'm jumping around again. But basically, John 10:10. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. But I have come that they might have life and have it to the full. Okay? So the thief, which is the devil, comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And this is Marx's philosophy. Everything must be destroyed. Okay? He's doing the worst work of the thief. He's doing the work of the devil. And don't forget, steal and kill. And those three things are basically what we get with Marxism. We get stealing, killing, and destroying. Marxists would say, we need to share everything. All have to be equal. All the means of production and the goods of society are distributed equally to each from each according to his ability, to each according to his need, right? So it gives you the idea that they believe everything should just be equally distributed, but it's anything but. I think Fidel Castro, the Cuban communist leader, this was a poor peasant, militant guy. But by the time he died, he was worth almost $500 million. Okay, and every time one of these dictators, communist dictators, got deposed or whatever, they always went somewhere and took all their money with them, all the money that they had hoarded, because that's really what it is. And everyone will say, "Oh, that's not how it should be." No, that's exactly how it was intended to be. The elites in communism they're not going to share in this equal distribution of anything. Another good show to see would be Robert Duvall played Stalin in I think it was a TV movie about 30 years ago, back in the 90s. Look that one up and see how Stalin was living the high life while everyone else was starving. And then going through Ukraine and on the train, and the peasants saying, "Tell Comrade Stalin we're starving. He must not know. He must not know we're all dying." And he cut, and Stalin's living it up, eating lobster and steak and whatever, and laughing at the fact that these peasants are dying, because that's what this is. It's a satanic enterprise based on lies. Stalin was fully aware that those people were starving to death. That was the intent. That was the plan. And, go through the numbers. If the numbers even mean anything, people argue about the numbers. Did, Stalin kill 10 million or 40 million? Did Mao kill 50 million or 70 million? Well, Jordan Peterson makes this point. Once you get over 10 million, you've made your point. Okay. And for the people that say, Marxism hasn't been tried correctly, this next time we do Marxism, we'll do it correctly. And I always say, well, what does that mean? Because about 100 million, by everyone's estimate, at least 100 million people died because of communism, were murdered. So is doing it right meaning only 50 million will die, or does it mean 200 million die? Are you gonna half it, or are you gonna double it? Which is it? Because it's kill, steal, kill is Satan's second action, right? The thief comes to steal, kill, and then destroy. And that's what we see now. The destroying part. We have an entire underground. It's not really underground much now. I mean, we just had a communist mayor and elected in New York City, and I was looking yesterday at the new governor of Virginia, Democratic governor, that for some reason Virginia decided to go back to the dog vomit with that and all the things we have. We're in a communist revolution, and it's destroying everything. They're going after churches now. They're going after all the institutions. They've destroyed the family. They're well along to destroying faith in this country. And basically the goal, Marx's favorite quote, everything must be destroyed. The idea is to level everything to the ground and build up your perfect communist society from the ashes. And they somehow think that they're the ones that will do this, and they'll have their utopia when all they will bring is death and suffering and misery and that drabness and that fear and that bathing in lies that you saw in the Chernobyl clip. And, I tell a story. When I was in college, I went on a summer mission trip, and we went behind the Iron Curtain with literature, Christian literature, for the people of Romania. And I tried to get into Romania, and Romania was the darkest place on earth. This is where Dracula, all the legends, all the dark things of Transylvania really manifested themselves in communism. Don't believe me? Read Richard Wurmbrand's book on torture for Christ. The men torturing him, saying, "I'm the devil, and I've come to do the devil's work, and I'm going to torture you, and I'm going to enjoy myself," or whatever. Just that dark, satanic thing that communism brings. And we got caught at the border with a bunch of Christian literature. I've told the story before. A young army soldier was put on us to guard us while the security forces that were on the side of the dictator went in and saw what we had. And, as soon as they did, the soldier turned to us and asked us for a Bible, because that was the story in Romania. The church had gone underground, and the church had started a revolution. It was just then starting the revolution. It manifested itself about 7 years later. And eventually, but that was the divide. He had to wait until those security forces went into the office and was out of view and weren't watching us. And then he turned to us and said, "Can I have a Bible?" And that's the story of my life. It's the only reason I do this kind of thing. One of the very main reasons I do this kind of thing is because communism is such a lie. And sad to say that the church, so it's sad enough to say our society is buying it, even with all the attacks. But even with all the attacks on churches, our churches are starting to buy into it too. I don't know if it's Stockholm syndrome. I don't know what it is. But the more it seems that we are attacked by our culture for clinging to the truth, the more we compromise the truth and seek to placate our culture. And when that happens, you inevitably start believing the lies. This is Satan's original, like I said, it was original game plan. His original tactic was to lie to Eve and say, "Did God really say that? Did God really say that you would know good and evil? Then you'd be just like him. Isn't that a good thing?" Okay, that's the lie. And that's the lie the church is being sold now, especially our young people. And, I suppose what goes around comes around. There's nothing new under the sun. Ecclesiastes, right? A little fatalistic, that book of Ecclesiastes. So maybe we have to relearn this lesson again. Maybe that's, again, the whole lesson of the Old Testament is God's people having to learn the same old lessons again, being disobedient to God, believing the lies, and then suffering the consequences, repenting, God restoring them, and then going around the same old thing again. So maybe that has to happen. I hope not. In order to prevent that from happening, the church has to do, the main thing the church has to do, in my view, and again, I only speak for the evangelical church, I'm an evangelical, we have to embrace the truth again. There's this lie going through the church now, that truth, standing for truth, is somehow, we need to somehow step away from that. You tell people, I tell people this a lot, and I get a standard response. Oh, well, truth, we misuse truth. We grind, use truth to grind people down, and, it's too harsh, and we need to be a little more loving. I'm like, what truth are you talking about? And what does this mean? It's this total non sequitur, red herring, whatever you would want to call it, that is that's a lie in of itself. We misuse love much more than we misuse truth. Believe me, we do. And that's a whole nother thing that I could go on. But we need to speak the truth in love. Truth is our mission. Love is the modifier. Love is how we do it. Love is the reason we do it. But we have to get back to where we stand for truth, and we're not afraid of standing for truth, and we're not intimidated by people who don't want us to stand for the truth, even in our own churches. Okay, stand for truth. Jesus is the truth. Truth is what's going to set people free, not our love. Our love is non-redemptive. Our love is imperfect, fallible, corrupted. God's love is what we need to tell people about, and that's the truth. So, again, it's a pernicious thing. This is how Satan works. It worked in the 20th century. He held half the world captive under this lie, this communist lie. And the truth won out. The West, Judeo-Christian civilization proved that it's vastly superior to communism and socialism. And as soon as we won that victory and proved that, everyone looked around and said, you know what we need? More socialism, more communism. We need to get back to communism. That's a Milton Friedman line. If you don't know who Milton Friedman is, you need to look him up too. So let's see. Back to your comments here. I haven't gotten to them. Lucas, Marxism is a soft-launched communism, and it's not even subtle about it. Yeah, you're right about that. It used to be subtle. It's not anymore. So because they don't have to be subtle anymore. They've been subtle enough to where they've woven their way into the institutions of our society, and they've somehow convinced our young people that it's a legitimate way to go, and our older people are intimidated by that, or they want to get the approval of young people, but we're certainly not setting them straight, even if they would listen to us. So up here in the Northeast, Spiritism is growing and accepted. Okay. Spiritism is another counterfeit, right? And Marauder, 600. Amen. Thank you. Marauder, I don't believe I've seen you. So thanks for joining us. So to sum up, Satan is a liar. Okay. And Marx is probably maybe the biggest tool Satan has ever used to spread his lies and to steal, kill, and destroy, which is his mission. And maybe Eve was a bigger, more impactful tool of the devil, and Adam, deceiving her and deceiving Adam. But again, this is going to be the story of the next round of elections for sure, and going forward for the foreseeable future. Are we going to return to the dog vomit of communism that we so successfully destroyed in the 20th century? We're headed that way, and the church needs to acknowledge it. And the reason we're headed that way is we've abandoned truth, and of all the institutions, all the entities in the world, the church should stand against that. The church should stand for truth. So, Lucas, wishing everyone a great week. Much blessing to everybody. Amen to that. Have a good week. I will see you tomorrow. Not tomorrow. I will see you next week. I won't be here tomorrow. So anyways, thanks for listening, guys. Take care. Hey, it's Joel here. If you enjoyed this, you know what to do. Go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you disagree or have a different thought, please leave a comment. I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks for watching.